Joining us now is anti-Zionist Jew Alon Mizrahi from the Mizrahi perspective. Alon, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
So first of
Happy
all, I have to
be
give
with
you a congratulations on the Substack follow from Roger Waters. I saw your post on X. Gal Gadot got herself a Hollywood star today. I got this, and it's infinitely a greater honor in case I need to state the obvious. So congratulations on that. That is a pretty big honor. Roger
Thank you
Waters is
very much.
following you.
Yeah, it feels like a landmark. Yeah.
Really? I mean, he's a paid Substack subscriber, so that's pretty cool. That is actually really cool. So congrats on that.
And he's one of the very few like people of note who speak up. So he's been a hero for me since I was a teen. I mean, for his music, and now he has this political stance. And it was a major surprise to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, let's talk about your background. So you're an anti-Zionist Jew. Where are you from?
I grew up in Israel. I'm a former Israeli, as fresh as you can as they come in terms of former. I mean, I spent my whole life in Israel. I'm a product of Israeli society. Maybe not a typical product of Israeli society, but this is where my upbringing, my education, my language, yeah, yeah.
And you're also Arab.
Yeah, but both my parents, I mean, my father was born in Palestine. I'm basically a Palestinian Jew.
Oh,
And,
interesting.
yeah. And my mom, yeah, there's it's a small group in Israel, but it does exist. And my mom was born in Morocco. So, and the whole subject of Arab Jews is so uh, almost never spoken of, and it is so important because we have been sidelined by Ashkenazi Jews, and the whole concept of what Judaism is and what it means has been centered around Eastern European Jews, and this is a grave sin towards a big collection of communities of Jews from the Arab world and the Muslim world.
So your dad being born in Palestine, is his family, did his family, were they always in Palestine? They'd been there for many generations?
Many generations, yeah, as far as we know. I mean, my grandfather's name was actually Abdallah, which is it's an Arab name.
Yeah.
And his father and grandfather, I mean, many generations. They lived in Tiberias in northern Israel. Yeah.
And they'd been there before Zionism then, before the settlers came through and started creating the state of Israel?
Yeah, before Herzl was born or anyone ever imagined that Zionism was going to be conceived. And I have to say something about this because Jews came to Palestine before Zionism, but not to colonize it, to live in it. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Jews from Morocco, thousands of people came, and from Eastern Europe as well, and from Yemen, came to Palestine to live in Palestine because Jews do have a connection to Zion, to Palestine, to the land of Israel, but it was not Zionism. They didn't come to take over. They came to live in the land or on the land and be part of it, and it made a huge difference. A huge difference.
So your father and his side of the family being born in Palestine and from Palestine, what happened? Was he around for the Nakba?
Yeah, but he was a little kid. I mean, he had no idea. Actually, I never spoke with him about this. But I know from other people, other elderly Israeli Jews who lived through the Nakba, about the shock it was for them because some of them had Palestinian friends as children from the neighboring village or the neighboring community. And one morning they disappeared. And it is unbelievable how the similarity, because for Moroccan kids, I heard the same description. For Moroccan kids, their Jewish neighbors suddenly disappeared one morning. And the same thing happened for Jewish kids in Palestine. And Moroccan Jews were brought, basically violently almost, imported into Zionism by Israel in the first decade of its existence. So
How
Israel,
was it? How did that happen?
it's a long history, and I'm going to just give a taste of what happened, because Zionism basically wasn't very appealing for the majority of Jews during its first half century. Not many Jews immigrated to Palestine. Most European Jews either uh, immigrated to the US. I mean, millions of Jews left to the US since the 1880s, and many perished in the Holocaust. And the people who survived the Holocaust didn't want to come to Israel. They still wanted to go to Western Europe or to the US. So Zionists, having committed the Nakba and won the independence, faced the reality of an empty land, empty from Jews. There were still some Palestinians, but not many Jews. They had to bring in more people.
Mm-hmm.
So this is when they discovered that they have this pool of human resources in the Arab world of Jews. So they sent messengers and activists, Zionist activists, to convert Jews to Zionism and bring them over. And they did more than that. They sabotaged, they had committed terrorist acts to destabilize communities and create hate between Jews and Arabs in Iraq and Morocco and other places. And eventually, and they spread lies and promises about what life in the newly found Israel meant. They told everybody, for instance, you're going to live in Jerusalem, which was the old Jewish dream. When the Messiah was going to come, he's going to return us to Jerusalem and to Zion. So
Mm-hmm.
they told them you're going to live in Jerusalem, but they sent them into the desert and all kinds of faraway places, and confiscated their. Many Moroccan Jews had French passports. They took away all the passports for them to not be able to leave.
Wow.
And I've heard accounts of people being taken off buses. They were bussed into Israel was just beginning to exist as a country. There was nothing there. They settled the desert with those people, with the bodies of the people who came from Morocco and other places. And I've heard accounts, personal family stories of people who were taken off buses using violence. They were clubbed off buses because they didn't want to go.
Jeez. It
So
sounds like the Zionist project has been violent towards both Jews and non-Jews. And I mean, it's been a violent and abusive project to to everybody because of their hardcore zealot, ideas of creating this land. What is so when I hear that kind of a story, it adds a level of, I think, sadness and sympathy for the Jews that are living in Israel, to know that some of them, their families were violently brought there. They didn't want to be there. So they're not the colonial settlers that, all Israelis are categorized as. Because there is that, well, all of these Israelis, they don't belong here. They're all settlers. But it sounds like a large group of them were not at all. They were forcibly placed there. They didn't want to be there. They wouldn't have left their their homelands of Morocco or Iraq or wherever. And so, what do you do with that? I know you're an anti-Zionist Jew. What do you do with that information? I mean, what should happen to the state of Israel if there are these? And there were also Jews, of course, in Europe that were fleeing genuine persecution, and they needed
Yeah.
somewhere to go, and where they could go was Israel. And they weren't there. They didn't want to go to take land and terrorize Arabs or Palestinians, but that's what ended up happening with the government. The leadership ended up doing those sorts of things. But what do you do with that information with going forward, or what should happen with Israel?
I have to be honest. I'm at a loss for what to think about this, because I'm connected to this issue from every side imaginable. I have Palestinian background. I am a Jew and I'm an Israeli, and I have seen what really bad ideas do to societies.
Yeah.
But Zionism, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, Zionism has to go. It can't go on. It is unsustainable. It is destroying the Middle East. It is destroying Jews, and they don't get it. I see a blindness as to the implication of Zionism and what Israel is doing. People don't get what's happening to the reputation of Jews as a result of this. People can't say it.
Yeah.
You can't say it. But in 10 years, things may be different. The geopolitics may be different. The US may no longer be a superpower. And there's no regard for the future and morality and what's going on. I mean, yesterday, and it wasn't the first time, I saw a child die on a hospital bed, a 3-year-old toddler. And the medical staff, they chanted prayers, Muslim prayers, as this toddler was dying. And it wasn't the first time I saw something like this. This kinds of stuff, I don't know what to
Yeah.
do with it. And I have lived most of my life in Israel.
Yeah.
And I what I see is how destructive this is, how cruel and inhumane and how destructive it is, and it has no future. And part of me is trying to tell my former country, because I can't call it my country anymore, you have to stop, because what you're doing is you are bringing a catastrophe upon yourself. You have to stop it before this catastrophe.
Yeah.
But no one seems to want to listen. I mean, the conformity is so strong that no one dares like break rank with the politically approved message.
Yeah.
You have to kill children. You have to. We're looking at a I don't know, a huge historical disaster as it's happening and as it's about to get worse.
Yeah. What is the sentiment in Israel? You're Israeli, so you have a better understanding. You recently, on your Substack, the Mizrahi Perspective, did a piece on why Zionism has such a grip over American politics, culture, and consciousness. And I think, here in the US, we have there's varying degrees of understanding of it, but we have an understanding of Zionism here. Some of it's money, some of it's religion, some of it's probably racism and hatred and just extremism. But what is it with Israel? What is it? The sentiment there seems to be more even extreme. Here in the United States, most Jews support the Zionist project. That number is dwindling a bit with the younger Jews, but they're still overwhelmingly in support. And we know that from the time they're born, basically, when they're going to synagogue, when they're talking to their peers and their friends, that they're told Israel's your homeland. We understand that the indoctrination happens really young. But what is it in Israel? Because Israel seems to be even more extreme. The sentiment is more violent, more extreme. What is it that you think has caused that in Israel compared to, I don't know if you've ever lived in the United States or been here, enough to know the perspective, but just kind of trying to understand the differences and why it's so much more extreme in Israel.
Um, Israel is different because it is a bubble. It is isolated from basically the rest of humanity, and it is being shielded from its neighbors, from the rest of from humanity, basically by this support of the U.S. The U.S. is there to make sure Israel never faces consequences for what it's doing. So Israel can be as belligerent and brazen as lawless as it wants, because the US will make sure nothing ever happens to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is an illusion because something is going to happen to it eventually. That's life. This whole idea of there's no isolation. No one is isolated for long. It can work for a short period of time, but no one is truly isolated. We are all connected. I mean, this is so true. And Israel has been, and it's a very bad idea from the get-go. Zionism, this whole idea of not living in Israel, not living in Palestine, but being the overlords of Palestine, being the colonizers, the rulers, the supremacists. This is terrible. I mean, this is enough to drive people crazy. But when you combine this, I mean, as opposed to what happened in apartheid in South Africa, because they were not shielded, eventually reality caught up to them. They weren't able to isolate themselves from the consequences of what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But because of American support, Israel has been able to go on and go on with this. And not only American, it's European, it's the whole Western settler colonial system.
Yeah. Is the sentiment amongst Israelis? I mean, there's various different types of Jews in Israel, right? Some of them, like you said, are Ashkenazi. They come from Eastern Europe. Some are from Morocco or Iraq, the Arab Jews. Is the sentiment different between the different groups?
Not enough to talk about it. I
Huh.
mean, I've been drawn and fascinated by the politics of evil from a young age. I remember reading 1994 as a 15-year-old, and it was such a meaningful experience. It's such a heartbreaking experience for me. And I've had this, and as a Jew, you are taught about the Holocaust. And for me, I was always thinking, if this was Germany, would I resist? Would this person that I know resist? Would other people resist? This is the kind of thought I had, because I was always obsessed with freedom. And this is a big part of freedom for me, being able to break away from society when it is doing wicked things. If you can't do that, you are not free.
Mm-hmm.
And I have never come across, and I read a lot about it, and I dedicated like years of my life to trying to understand and figure out how those mechanisms work to make people so conforming to this degree. And I have never come across anything that comes close to Zionism. There is no dissent. This is my next piece on my Substack.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that there is no dissent, I mean, there's no saving grace. This is the title that I'm planning for this piece. Because Vietnam was terrible. I mean, what the US was doing in Vietnam was, we can never forget those images, and not only in Vietnam, in other places as well. But at least there was some resistance.
Mm-hmm.
This gave Americans, I think, for better and for worse, because this was eventually used as a fig leaf. Because we're good, we have a position. It means there's no need to oppose anything else, because we have like we checked it, this box of opposition. But still, people resisted. Many Americans and the civil rights movement, white people and were part of the struggle. So it makes a huge difference when there's even a small amount of dissent and people who stand out. And it is somehow okay to be in this position. But where Zionism is concerned, there is no dissent. And it's not, this is not only in the Jewish world. When you look at Western politics, no one dares to condemn the murder of babies. This is something out of a nightmare.
Yeah.
This is not normal reality. This is not more feminism, traditional values, more trans rights, less, I don't know, more socialism, more capitalism. This is not even the usual cynical war propaganda that we used to hearing. This is actually mass murder of babies and children on camera, and people are not daring to condemn it.
Yeah.
This is not ordinary. Even if, like, we are accustomed to accept so much evil as ordinary, but this is even not that. This is many steps further.
Well, there are a lot of people speaking up. I mean, our governments aren't listening to us, but there's a lot of Americans that are speaking up. There's a lot of Europeans. I mean, we're seeing the marches in the streets, the Palestinian, the pro-Palestine protests. We're seeing all of that. So there's definitely people, probably not in Israel, but around the world who are very concerned and are not going along with this project. The issue is the leadership. And there's a lot of people that are not in positions of leadership, just average people who also really support Zionism. And, I hear it around me all the time of these are non-Jewish, non-religious, they're not Zionists, they're not Christians, they're nothing like that, but they support Israel blindly. And when you ask why, they say, well, we have to, we need Israel, we need Israel. And when I ask, well, why, there's not really a clear answer there. So there's been some programming or belief that's been built in there. But so there is pushback. But it's not enough, to get the leadership. The leadership is just they're not in line with a lot of the population. Why do you think that is? I mean, you just talked about this, like I mentioned on your Substack, with why Zionism has such a grip on American politics, culture, and consciousness. What do you think? What is the reason for it?
Well, the basic reason is the original sin of America. Because America never came to grips with what its founding was based upon, and included what needed to happen to make the U.S. possible, to make America possible. It is hidden, it is concealed, it is not spoken of, and I think that the American consciousness is is not at ease. So when you're in this kind of denial, you have to always find ways to reaffirm, because we need to feel okay. We need to be moral. This is part of the human condition. And when you're in the wrong in such a fundamental way, when your house is built on the ruin of someone else's family, literally. This is not a simple task to cope with, but on top of that, this is what I think maybe I bring into the discussion, because the first Americans, the Puritans who came from England to the US, had this bizarre delusion of themselves as the Hebrews from the Bible. This is how they spoke of themselves. America was the promised land which God promised to them, and they were the new Hebrews on a larger scale.
Yeah.
So this opened the way. So how can the US deny the Bible? If they can't deny the Bible, they have to recognize the Jewish and Zionist version of it. This is the philosophical quagmire the US is caught in.
Well, the thing that I would say about that is the vast majority of us that are American did not come from that stock. Most of us, I think that one of the reasons why it's not reckoned with here in the United States is like, for example, my family came from Vietnam recently. I was the first one born in the United States on my Vietnamese side. And on my dad's side, Denmark and Ireland, but only in the early 1900s, not way back when Indians were being cleared off the land and land was being taken, and it was way after that point. And so most of us don't have any feeling of oh well, I'm responsible in some way, because we're just not. So I think, but that's a little different than I think what's going on in Israel, because even if there are some Jews that are, there's always Jews immigrating into Israel. There's a big project to try to get Jews to come into Israel and live, to make Aliyah, right? But if you're just the average Jew from wherever and you're moving into Israel today, you might also not feel like, oh, you yourself were not part of the Nakba. That was a previous generation. You did not do that. Now you're living on land that is, it's just, it's there. But however, the difference with Israel is that right now Israel as a country is still committing the cleansing, right, on Gaza, trying to take over the West Bank, destabilizing countries around it. So it's still in the middle of that project. So everybody in Israel is essentially complicit in this, because either they're directly involved with everybody serving in the IDF, or they're by proxy involved by not speaking up and actually saying we got to put an end to this, which there are some that do, for sure, like yourself, but most of them don't. So I think there's maybe a little bit of a difference in the complicity level, whereas most Americans have immigrated in, the families immigrated in not that long ago. And so there's no real connection to, oh, I'm part of the Trail of Tears, and the killing of these native tribes. The vast majority of us just don't come from, at least I think it's the majority of us. I'd have to actually look at the stats. I'm sure there's definitely a lot of Americans that, their family does come from like the Pilgrim days, but I actually don't think it's the majority. So I think that's the issue, is that a lot of us push back on that idea of we're responsible when our families came so much later. And yeah, it was atrocious what happened in the beginning and how the land was taken and colonized. But a lot of us just don't feel connected to that. Does that make sense?
It's from my perspective, it's a little bit denialist, and I'll tell you why. Because the second most powerful person in U.S. politics and the richest man in America is doing Nazi salutes when he makes speeches to crowds.
Well, I mean, people are saying that's not what he meant. He's just showing
People,
love
yeah,
with his heart.
yeah, sure. And the U.S. is about to go to war with Iran, and it is
Right.
bombing in Yemen. I mean, if there's one thing this genocide should teach us, I mean, apart from the horror and shock, I mean, in terms of for people who want to better society and who care about society and who care about tomorrow, if there's one thing a takeaway we need to get from this is, if the system is fundamentally flawed, like the US and like Israel, the end point is Holocaust.
Yeah.
The end point is catastrophe. And all the comfort, because life in the US can be very comfortable, okay? You have Netflix and Amazon, and you have all the comforts if you're like on the bright side of things. If you're poor and black and or maybe disabled and maybe a medical bill impoverished you, life is not so comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But for many Americans, life is comfortable, and they feel they have a lot of freedom to say a lot of stuff. Look at this genocide and realize that this is coming for you. This is coming. Either you'll be the victims of it or you'll be the perpetrators. And it's not gonna make a lot of difference. When the system is, we cannot be in an imagined comfort zone. When your system has the tiniest bit of supremacy, of separation between people and groups, of hierarchy, when your system has any shred of hierarchy, it's going to, the society is unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to end in disaster. This whole idea that we can be We can just cruise along. When a monstrous system allows us a period of time or a place to supposedly be ourselves, it's a delusion when we have to fight it. We have to fight it because the US is actively participating in this genocide, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
Israel is committing it gleefully without a
Right.
care in the world. And it's not because Americans are or Jews or Israelis are insane or psychopaths, but this is what bad political systems do to people. They will make a monster out of you and your children and everyone you know. You have to fight the day. This is my takeaway. You have to fight the day. You can't relax.
How are you accepted in Israel with your viewpoints? Have you had a pushback from your family members, your friends?
It's a painful question. I've been a radical lefty and a radical Mizrahi lefty, which is like even a smaller niche of political activity and consciousness. This is seen as very, very odd, very unusual, very suspicious,
Hmm.
highly unliked. I mean, to put it mildly. Uh, but during this genocide, I completely broke. I'm not even a rebel inside Israel or inside the Jewish spectrum. I'm outside of it. I'm not in it. I don't see myself as in it. I don't belong in it anymore because it doesn't have room for me at all.
What do you mean when you say
So
you're not in it anymore? Like, what do you mean by that?
it means I don't want to identify as an Israeli anymore, and I can hardly call myself a Jew anymore because the levels of conformity and complicity and how obnoxious and horrible the crimes are. I can't be in the room and argue with people who have these kinds of opinion. I can't be in a room with them. I can have some kind of partnership with people whose opinions have a little bit of legitimacy. When
Yeah.
people support the mass murder of babies, I can't be anywhere near them. I can't be near them. I won't allow myself to be in them. And when for years I had this feeling that Israel was preparing something like this for Gaza. I even used to joke, not joke is not the right word, but that maybe Israel should find new and creative ways to create gas chambers for Gazans. I mean, 5, 6 years ago, because it was in the air. The way Israel society and Israeli politicians and spoke about Gaza and treated Gaza, there was no other way for this to end. There was no other way. I mean, all the clues were there, and I could see them because I was already, my eyes were open
Hmm.
at this stage. And after October 7, and the way the Israeli politicians reacted, and the way Israeli society reacted, and the way the culture conceptualized what happened, and when they started spreading all the fake horror stories, I knew what was coming.
Hmm.
And I needed to distance myself from it. I just had to. I felt I had to. And when I said, for instance, that this was one tweet I remember. I mean, until a year until the like January of 2024, I never tweeted in English. I never wrote in English. I only wrote in Hebrew. I was a radical and a rebel, but I still spoke the language of the people who hated everything I had to say, but some people still wanted to listen, still wanted to hear. I still could communicate with them. But there's this one tweet marked for me like the break. When they started spreading the mass rape hoax, and now we completely know it's a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
I said Israel is saying this because it is preparing. There's a Hebrew word for genocide. Israel is preparing for horrors, unimaginable horrors. And I said it in real time in November of 2023. And this was the break for me. And the whole I was basically lynched on Israeli Twitter for saying this.
Mm-hmm.
And people never forgave me for saying this. And I don't think there's like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how Israel can be normal again. I have no idea.
When you say that you barely even identify as a Jew anymore, what do you mean by that?
Listen, for me, the whole concept of identity in terms of religion and political identity and ethnic identity is actually wrote a book in Hebrew about freedom. And this was one of the main topics I was preaching for people to get free from. You cannot have your worldview dictated by your bloodline. This is ridiculous. So, identity in this regard is also already problematic for me. I don't want a world, and we don't want a world where people who are born in Moscow feel obliged to just recite everything society tells them a Russian must believe in, because this leads us to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
People have to always question and doubt what society tells them. This is for me the freedom 101. This is what you have to do. But I didn't mind having this because I do have a background. I do have a history. So it didn't bother me to have some kind of affiliation or attachment to an ethnic identity, as long as it left me some room for maintaining my humanity. Because I am, my commitment to my humanity comes first always. It is before everything else. So when the Israeli identity and gradually the Jewish identity demand of me to support this genocide, to support Zionism and everything that it's doing, to cheer the murder of babies, I don't want it anymore. This is too far. As a thinking person, I'm saying enough. If your sense of identity, if your ideology, and it is not just about Jews, this is very important for me to say to everyone who's listening. If your ideology, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or Christian, Hindu, socialist, communist, whatever, if the political establishments of your identity tell you that you need to be behind the murder of innocent people and children, you have to tell them to go to hell. I'm out. Identity is good and nice. It's good to have your cuisine, your language, your the way you have a conversation, the way you have relationships, the way you. There are many nice and beautiful things to ethnic identity, which I really like. But if this comes at the cost of losing my humanity and being cruel to a child, I'm saying fuck it. I'm out. And this is where I'm at. I mean, Judaism, and again, this is what I'm going to write about next. There's nowhere for me to hide. And because I see myself, and maybe others see me as well, as a not just a private individual voice, but someone who represents some kind of opinion or a voice that that it has, I don't know, some people identify with it. It's important for me to get our other Jews out of the closet. You have to speak out now. You have to save yourselves. You have to save your humanity, and maybe there's going to be a tomorrow. There's going to be a post-genocide world, a post-genocide society. And in this society and in this world, Jewish children will have to have someone to look up to. Someone who said, I'm not going to do this with you. I'm going to sit this one out. I'm out of this. And non-Jewish children are going to need Jewish figures who spoke out against this, because we can't have this kind of unanimity. We can't have this. And again, this is the Jewish identity and Jewish politics are now at the center of things, but this, whatever I'm saying here, would apply just the same to any other group at any other time. This is, nothing is unique. I mean, this is also part of an important part of my message. No one is unique and nothing is unique. Jews are not unique and Muslims are not. I mean, we're in the middle of this craziness of trying to portray Muslims as dangerous, as violent, as this insanity of trying to portray 2 billion people, almost a third of humanity, as dangerous and bad people. And mainstream politicians and figures and celebrities in the US are doing this now. Not only in the US, India loves this kind of rhetoric. I mean, they're also having their nationalistic moment.
Mm-hmm.
No one is special and no one is unique. No one is above the rest of humanity, and no one is below the rest of humanity. And anyone who comes to you with this set of murderous nonsense, send them home. Send them the fuck out. We can't have this.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. I myself have questioned. I know people that have left religions and left their identities for a lot less than genocide. You know, they didn't like Catholics. There were a lot of Catholics that left the Catholic Church when the scandals came out that the church hierarchy was covering up for priests who were molesting children. And they said, that's it, I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't want to be Catholic anymore. And I'm not going to, you know, it's been part of my family, my traditions for years and years, but I'm out. I don't want to be associated with this. And I've seen other religions, people do the same for other religions for a lot less and give up their identities in that way. And I've had a lot of that same feeling about Jews today. Because throughout history, the vast majority of Jews, and we even, if you go back to even the biblical times with the 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of them were lost. What does that mean? That means 10 of them left Judaism. They no longer associated as Jews, and they were absorbed into other societies. So we know throughout history, most Jews gave up the Jewish identity. The vast majority have given it up, and they're not identified today or acknowledged today as Jews. And that might even be a lot of the Palestinians today who are living in Palestine, who are Muslims, who identify as Muslim Arabs and Palestinians, and yet their family history, you go back far enough, might have actually been Jewish during the times of Jesus, right? I mean, that's very much a possibility. So a lot have walked away. I have personal friends and family members, personal friends of family members who also their families were Jewish at one point. If you ask the person today, are you Jewish? They'd be like, no, I'm not, but my family was, back in the day. So I understand this, that you could walk away from it, as much as people might push on that and say, no, you once a Jew, always a Jew. And it's just not true. I mean, there's so many that aren't, but at the same time, so I've had that same wonder and feeling of like, I personally would not identify anymore. I'm like you, I've left a religion for a lot less. I personally left a religion for a lot less. So I know I myself would not stand for it, that I would say, I don't identify with this group, because the vast majority of the group, unfortunately, even though there's some of us that don't, that don't feel this way, the majority does, and the majority rules. And what am I going to do about that? They get to dictate the whatever it is. And so I know I would leave myself. I think I would. But I also understand the argument of not, and that instead you should be part of the minority, even though it's very difficult, even though you very much are the minority, but being part of the minority that does speak out to at least give not the majority a bad name. I mean, the majority has the bad name, but at least there's some of you that, and then we could say, yeah, but there are some Jews. I mean, that's what we're able to say right now because of Jews like you. We're able to say, yeah, but there are some Jews who do not support this. But if you all leave, then there won't be anymore. And then it'll just be all the Jews are genocidal, and they're all extremists, and they're all genocidal, because there would be none left, because the rest of you got out and no longer identify. So, I mean, but then again, if something's becoming so extreme, maybe you have no choice but to walk away and say, I can't identify with it anymore because there's no hope. I mean, do you feel like there's just no hope? And that's why you would say, I'm out. I can't be a part of this.
It's a good question, and I'm not sure I'm able to answer it fully at this stage, because things are happening now.
Yeah.
There's an element of an almost a reflex reaction. When you see something this horrible, you have to do something. You have to do something. You can't just keep on with your routine. This is something more people should do this. We shouldn't allow ourselves to see evil and just continue. I'm always, if you were to go on a bus or a train, and you would see an adult man harassing a child, you wouldn't shut up. I at least hope, not you
Right.
personally, everyone who's watching. Or someone abusing an old black woman on a bus. You wouldn't shut up. I
Yeah.
believe most people won't. So why do you shut up when children are being mass murdered? First, you shout and scream and do whatever you want to stop this. And you make a scene. You make an actual scene. This is what you do. This is the normal reaction. You make a big scene if you can't stop it because the assailant is stronger than you. You make a scene. You draw attention. You try to scare them off. You do something. You do something. You don't go on. And this basic human instinct, I feel, is being broken in us. We are being indoctrinated to not have that healthy impulse
Yeah.
of wanting to stop something horrible we're seeing. And this is so worrying. This is why I think this genocide and the way it's being treated and promoted by Western media, by Western establishments, this is so much worse than only the genocide itself, which is enough of a horror. This is indoctrinating people to not speak up when they are seeing the most horrible things imaginable.
Yeah.
So when I scream and shout and do whatever I can about this, this is not only me as a Jew. This is me as a human being. We can't have human beings suffer like this at the hands of other human beings, and no one's. What is this?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a much bigger responsibility as just a human being. It's just a human, and I expect other people to have the same. To have
Yeah.
the same.
Well, it's a great question, and it's something that we're even seeing on small levels, like on New York subways, where a woman's being raped and passengers are just sitting there, not doing anything, or someone's being lit on fire. I mean, the video of the woman that was lit on fire, and people just were walking by like it was nothing. There's something that is really, and that's the conditioning. And I guess it's just when you see it so much and it's so common, you stop feeling, I guess, and the humanity is gone. And you're right, and that's happening on small levels, and it's happening obviously in this particular case on a large level. And I think it's
Yeah,
definitely a good
you know,
question.
this reminds me of Clockwork Orange, this classic movie by Kubrick. I mean,
Yeah.
we're actually living through it on a huge scale. I mean, this group of barbarians is doing all these horrors. I mean, the four young British guys who are now someone else, and the scene where the protagonist is being exposed to all this violence with his lids kept open. But they were doing this in order to make him less violent, to root out his inner violence and aggression. But
Hmm.
we are being subject to this kind of experiment in order for us to accept brutality,
Right.
to just be okay with it. And this is horrible. This is the psychological experiment part of it. Again, I don't know how people don't speak up. I mean, social scientists and psychiatrists and psychologists, because this has such a terrible impact. It cannot not have. No one
Yeah.
speaks out.
Well, you certainly are, Alon. So thank you so much for joining us and being here and giving us your insight. I think you've given some really profound insights. Quite honestly, I really enjoyed this conversation a lot. I encourage everybody to go to your Substack. Roger Waters has also subscribed to
Yeah.
Alon's Substack. It is called The Mizrahi Perspective. The link is down below. Alon Mizrahi, as well as the link to follow Alon on Twitter, is there also. So Substack or I guess X, that's what we're calling it. Alon, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate your
Thank
time.
you very much, Kim.
Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. It is free to watch. Just go to KimIversonShow.com and that'll direct you to it. So every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, check out the full show. See you there.